Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are, for an exciting panel about expanding the Latino vote hosted by Powering Blue in 2022 with Gain Power. I'm Eileen Garcia. I'm the Vice President of Solidarity Strategies, one of the nation's largest Latino-owned and operated political consulting firms. And I'm very excited to be joined tonight with an exciting panel of Latino vote experts and operatives to talk a little bit about the trends that we're seeing among the Latino vote. We all heard a lot about the Latino vote in 2020, especially in places like Miami-Dade County, the Rio Grande Valley. We've heard a lot of pundits and operatives talk about how the Latino vote is not a monolith and they weren't spoken to the way they needed to in 2020. And we've heard a couple of the same takes over and over since the last election, but now that we're less than a year out from the midterms, we want to have a frank conversation about where we're at with Latino outreach among Democrats, what we're doing well, what we're not doing as well, and where we go from here. So to kick us off, I'm excited to introduce Alicia Cisneros of Cisneros Strategies, which she built from the ground up as a female-led, minority-owned, full-service, direct mail, and paid field strategy consulting firm. Her political passion and knowledge in elections runs deep, having got her start at an early age in her home state of New Mexico. Since the start of her career, Alicia has worked across the country helping elect Democrats to office and fighting for progress. Now, as the founder of Cisneros Strategies, Alicia brings to politics a diverse voice for her clients' political strategy, paid field, and direct mail programs. So Alicia, Vox, among a bunch of other outlets, have reported data suggesting that Trump gained a lot of support among Latino voters in 2020. And that caused Democratic operatives and pundits to discuss the idea of the Latino vote a lot, like I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So having said that, do you think this is leading to improved strategies for outreach to Latinos? And how do you feel Democrats are doing with engaging this constituency ahead of the midterms?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a hot take to say it again that Latinos can't be treated as a monolith. As you said, this is something that we continue to beat the drum with. And for those who don't understand what that actually means when we're saying it, I'm going to explain it as much as I can. But Latinos encompass a wide diversity of groups within the community. There are Mexicans, there are Puerto Ricans, there are Cubans. Those are the different diverse groups that we mention when we're talking about Latino audiences. There are people who prefer to be called Hispanic versus Latino. So those different diversities are what we mean. What I think we need to do for the Democratic Party needs to do is be more intentional and inclusive about messaging. I think that, you're spot on that, it was, anyway, so we need to be more inclusive and intentional about messaging. There's opportunities for persuasion, education, mobilization. I think maybe where Democrats have gotten it wrong by not breaking out these subgroups, and gone are the days that we rely on Latinos to default to the Democratic Party. And we can't ignore data and polling and what that says about the individual communities and those diversities and the identities within the Latino and Hispanic communities.
I think you make a really great point about we've long thought Latinos default to the Democratic Party, and that has been to our own detriment, like we saw in 2020, of taking the constituency for granted. So knowing that, coupling it with data showing that from the census showing that Latinos are the fastest growing share of the electorate across the country, we are not necessarily firmly in the Democratic base. We are a bit more persuadable than folks have previously understood us to be, which presents an opportunity for both Democrats and Republicans. So what do you think the Democratic Party needs to do to gain their vote in upcoming elections beyond simply greater investments and starting programs earlier, which we've heard a lot, but what else can we do?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Democratic politics and some of the Democratic politics is still very white dominated. It is still very male dominated, and this shows up in strategy. I think to engage the Latino constituency, Democrats need to continue to bring in strategists and activists from the communities that they are trying to reach and engage with, first and foremost. Some Democratic committees and organizations have done this and are doing a great job at this and actively taking steps to do that hard work and not take the easy road and bring diversity into the table when planning constituency specific strategy. We understand to gain the Latino vote, we understand that subgroups within these Hispanic and Latino audiences, the messaging that we talk to, the communication needs to be culturally relevant. There needs to be more, I think there's a standard of misguided and maybe narrow strategy when it comes to communications from Democratic messaging. There's poorly executed translations or lack of cultural competency when it comes to design and images used. There's a struggle to connect because of these missteps. The values of the Democratic Party need to be resonant and resonate better with these constituencies and these sub-constituencies down to the nuanced level. And messaging needs to be formulated in language. And if you can, from the perspective and from somebody that is from the group that they are trying to reach. And that's really across cultures and, for outreach and messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be remiss if I don't say, although my questions are directed at Alicia, if our other panelists want to jump in, feel free to at any time. But real quick, I want to introduce Matt Barreto, who is the president and co-founder of BSP Research, formerly was the co-founder of the research firm Latino Decisions. Matt holds a PhD in political science and is also professor of political science and Chicana studies and Central American studies at UCLA, where he also directs their research center, Latino Policy and Politics Initiative, and the UCLA Voting Rights Project. Very impressive. In 2020, Barreto was hired by President Biden's campaign to direct polling and focus group research for Latino voters, and his research was credited with informing critical Latino mobilization efforts in states like Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, among others. So Matt, reports show that nationwide, Latinos cast a record 16.6 million votes in 2020, an increase of over 30% from the 2016 presidential election. By comparison, turnout was 16% greater among voters of all races, so we doubled that. Can we expect the Latino electorate to continue showing up in 2022 and 2024? And what other patterns are you seeing among these voters beyond just turning out so immensely?
Well, thank you, Eileen, for moderating and bringing us together today. It's great to be with you. And congratulations to all the work that you and everyone at Solidarity are doing. It's been great working with your team this cycle. Those gains we think are going to continue growing if we do the work to get the Latino vote out. But the population is growing, dramatically. You mentioned this in talking with Alicia about the census numbers. The Latino vote is going to continue to grow in its potential, in its capacity. We know that young people are entering the electorate at record numbers. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of citizen adult Latinos turning 18 in Arizona, in Nevada, in Georgia, in many of our battleground states. So that potential is there. It is growing at a much faster rate, nearly double, as you said, of the general electorate. What we have to do on campaigns is make sure we're reaching out to those folks, new voters, old voters, voters who maybe voted 8 years ago, 10, 12 years ago when Obama was president and now don't understand if they should still vote. But in particular, we need to focus on those new first-time voters. About a third in some of our key battleground states of Latinos were first-time voters in 2020. It was their first election ever voted. The trend continues. We are going to see those numbers continue to increase. But we have to remember, Alicia hit on this a little bit, like Latinos need more outreach and information because they're so new to the process. After first-time voters, our second largest category is second-time voters. So in some states like Georgia, North Carolina, almost up to half of the electorate is voting in either their first or second election ever. So outreach. What do you need to vote? What are the issues that are at stake? What do the parties stand for? The stuff that a lot of other folks take for granted, we have to be just doing that basic outreach and education into Latino communities. And if we do that, if we show people what's at stake, I do think we're going to continue to see those very robust, dramatic growth in our electorate, 30% year over year. It's possible we can hit those numbers again in 2024.
I hope so, but you make a good point, and I just wanted to add about, Latinos are not only new to voting and new to the process, but the average age of a Latino is only about 27 years old. We're about 10 years younger than the general population, and so not only is educating them on how to vote important, but on the process overall, they're usually informing the rest of their families on how to vote, on the issues, and understanding the nuance of the age and how we do that outreach. I think has been missing, but I think folks are starting to catch up on. Having said that, according to polling by 538, majority of Americans view President Biden unfavorably right now. Can you explain to our audience why you think this might change over the next 12, 11 months?
Well, the first is that there are just normal ebbs and flows in American politics that, going back as far as we can trace polling data, when a president comes in, they usually get an immediate honeymoon period, but then, the public starts looking at the policies, and oftentimes the opposition party gets a larger megaphone. They get to sort of amplify what they don't like. It was true when Trump was president that we were able to bring his numbers down. We had a great turnout year in 2018 because of that, because we were able to get people reflecting on that. And a little bit of that is happening right now. That's just a normal flow and a normal cycle. But I do think that the policies that the president is promoting are incredibly popular. If you look at any of the polling, if you go back and look at the issue polling at 538, the infrastructure plan, the stimulus bill, the child tax credits, what's in the Build Back Better Act, all of the clean energy and lowering costs. These are incredibly popular with the American public. So while Biden as the president has suffered from a little bit of bad press and attacks, the policies remain popular. And that's important because that means that as the policies are getting passed and getting implemented, we have an opportunity as Democrats to run on those popular policies and remind the voters what we're standing for. So I do think we're going to see that turn around. I think, as the Democrats continue to push this popular agenda that the voters support, those numbers are going to turn around, and we're going to start to reverse those trends that you see in some of the favorability polling.
Given how popular the president's plans are, as you mentioned, what is your recommendation? And this is a question now for the full panel, so everyone can jump in if they'd like, but what's your recommendation for how Democrats can use that in their messaging, in their strategies? How can campaigns, especially down ballot campaigns, run on the popular policies and that message?
I'll say very, quickly, and love to hear from all of the panelists, but contrast is important, especially for voters who are busy. They maybe aren't paying attention to, all of the election and political news of the day. Contrast is important. So for Democrats to stand up and say what they stand for and what the Republicans are doing right now and trying to block the agenda and trying not to make corporations and billionaires pay their fair share, the more that we can communicate what each party stands for, what Democrats are doing, what Republicans are attempting to block, that's important. The voters need to hear that over and over again, that Biden and Democrats are fighting for them, and getting that message out is important.
And I will add to that, if I may. I think you're right. Exactly, Matt. Reiterate those messages, but for the voter to resonate it with them, message how this affects their daily lives. What is it like for our constituents? What is sitting at every different dinner table across the country, and what has it done to positively affect them on a daily basis? Bring it local.
I think yes to everything that you both have said, and definitely we need to have a better messaging around our wins, because these are all wins that we've had over the past couple of months, and we're going to continue having wins. And I think messaging is going to be very important when it comes down to engaging voters at the doors, on the phones, when it's that person-to-person connection, having that message go all the way down and actually make it mean something to them. It's going to be really important.
Thank you for that. And y'all just heard from Silvina Larcon. She is the director of campaigns at Latino Victory, where she spearheads and drives strategic plans to support Latino candidates running for office. Silvina joins the team after developing and executing winning field strategies in the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections before taking back the House in 2018 as part of the DCCC's national field team. Silvina began her career organizing for immigration reform during the DREAM Act of 2010. She has created and executed mobilization strategies for congressional, state, regional, and national electoral and advocacy efforts, most recently as the campaigns and advocacy director at Guns Down America. She is a product of community college at Montgomery College, and Silvina then attended the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Silvina, there's an ongoing debate on how to approach the Latino community from a campaign perspective. And some go as far as to say that Democrats took the Hispanic vote for granted in 2020, as I alluded to a little earlier. From a campaign point of view, what do you think needs to happen in order to make sure Democrats do better with the Latino community in upcoming elections?
I think, and it cannot be understated enough, how Latinos are not a monolith. I know you've heard this over and over again, but I think we really need to underscore this because perhaps some people are not listening. We need to be able to run culturally competent campaigns that are speaking to our community. We need to have organizers on the ground that look like their communities. Alicia mentioned, voters in South Texas are very different than voters in South Florida, and very different than voters in New York City, including California. So they're all very different. So we need to make sure that we are talking to them exactly in the message that is going to resonate best with them. Not only that, we have to also take in consideration that the diversity also comes in age. Although our electorate is a lot younger, there are those Latinos that are 50 and above who tend to be a little bit more conservative, and who had been spooked by the rhetoric from the Republicans. Early and consistent investment is going to be key. Again, it's been said before, but I don't think there's a magic recipe. I think it's very straightforward. We need to have early and consistent engagement in our community. We need to have year-round organizing. We've seen it from the Republicans that are putting up community centers in McAllen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. We have them putting them up in Doral, Florida, which is a hub that is burgeoning with the Latino community. The Republicans have figured it out, and we need to get in the game and make sure that we are competing on par. And last but not least, as Matt mentioned, the Build Back Better agenda is going to be something that Democrats are going to have to run on, and we need to make sure that we are articulating to our constituents exactly how this is going to affect their lives. We need to have better messaging about our wins, because we are winning, regardless of some of the polling that is out there in Biden approvals. Like Matt said, this ebbs and flows, and we're going to have a lot more wins coming in the coming months. And last, I will say this one last thing. The socialism and law and order rhetoric, it's something that we need to learn how to combat. This is something that the Republicans used in 2020, and it worked. It definitely was successful in their part. So we need to find ways on how to go about combating that message.
Absolutely. Something you said a little bit earlier that really stood out to me is the point about, we do obviously have those Latinos who are 50 and older who are a little bit more conservative, and I think that's something that might have surprised Democratic operatives, especially those who have traditionally not done Latino outreach the way we would want them to. I think that's something that was really emphasized in the Rio Grande Valley in 2020, when, the Latinos who live in the Valley tend to work, law enforcement jobs or in the oil rigs. And so some of the messaging among the Democratic Party about defund the police, although it works in some parts of the country, might not have necessarily worked in the Valley. And understanding the nuances of how we differ from region to region, but also by age, to your point, I think is vital to our success as a party with this constituency going forward. What else do you think continues to be misunderstood about our community?
I think most
Um,
one of the things that is misunderstood is that Latinos are persuasion voters. We've shown that. We actually did a postmortem analysis this past summer, and we found out that Latinos and voters of color are persuasion voters. So we need to treat them as such. We need to stop the late investments in the last 6 weeks of the campaign, and need to make sure that we're talking to them in ways that they understand. Again, consistent early investment, year-round organizing. These are all basics that are going to make sure that we are going to be able to win in 2022, 2024. This one size fits all model, I should say, it doesn't work for Latinos. As you say, we are a diverse community, not only in cultures, but also in ages. But those are the things that I think they're still misconceived. At Latino Victory, we've been working with candidates that have the array of ideologies, from progressives to more moderates, and I've been talking to a lot of them. And one of the things that we say at Latino Victory is that when Latinos are on the ballot, we run culturally competent campaigns. We have opportunities like Colorado 8, which is a new congressional district, and it has about 30% of the population being Latino. We have amazing candidates who are running, who need the support of the Democratic Party. You need to make sure that we're listening not only to the community, but also the candidates that are from the communities that are going to be able to bring out the Latino vote.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I'd like to, in these last couple of minutes that we're together, try to wrap it up a little bit. I'd like to ask each of you, and we'll start with Alicia, for your kind of closing remarks, your takeaways of what's happened with the Latino vote, where we're at, and the opportunities going forward ahead of the midterms. Alicia?
Yeah, I think what has happened is that we have been treating the audiences and the Latino audience and Hispanic audience as a monolith, as we can be repeating, and they're not the same. And that's very, very important to remember. Remember, these are subgroups within a larger community that need to be special. You need to strategize, especially or specialize around. I think there's an opportunity to start early, and yes, we should do persuasion, but it shouldn't always only be. It should also be education. It should also be mobilization. We cannot rely on Latinos to default to Democrats anymore. We are a largest community, one of the largest voting bases there is now, and treat us as such. And I think going forward, formulating, bringing on the perspective from strategists who are from the culture, who know the audience, who are maybe from the community, whether they're a strategist or an activist or somebody who is down on the ground, who's in an organization, who can help build this work in this communication, help them formulate the message in language, in culture, and get it from the perspective of the audience that we're trying to reach, and be culturally competent and cognizant of that diversity.
Absolutely. I like something that we say at Solidarity often, especially on calls with our clients, is when Latinos are in the room, we win. And I hear that in what you're saying so much. Matt, what opportunities do you see the Democratic Party has with Latinos in this next election?
I think one of the things we're trying to do over at Build Back Together, the issue advocacy group, is have a Latino always on project. I know that a lot of the other party committees are doing this as well. The DCCC essentially has a Latino always on project, and we're learning from the mistakes of the past. You heard all the panelists say we need to be out there earlier. This was in the Solidarity post-election analysis. Really, the most important takeaway, I think, from the report that your firm led, Eileen, was get out there earlier. That a lot of what we did worked, it just wasn't early enough. And I think we have that opportunity now. We're trying to push everyone on our side of the aisle to do more and to start now. And I'm seeing it start to happen. I'm seeing, as I said, Building Back Together is doing this. I'm seeing the DCCC doing this. And more people are investing early. And that's what it's going to take, because as we said, There's the most first-time voters, the most second-time voters. You have a young electorate that doesn't have quite as much experience. We need to get out there. And another point that Silvina made that's very important is that there's not a magic formula. Just get out there, connect with Latinos. Make sure you're doing it in a culturally competent way, but just get out there and connect with our community. And when you do that, you will see the dividends. You will see the larger turnout. You will see the larger vote shares for your side. And I think we're doing that now. We're starting to. So I'm expecting to see this continue. And, let's keep at it and double our efforts and triple our efforts until we get all the Latino vote out.
Sorry about that, having Wi-Fi issues. Love this age of Zoom. Silvina, what do you think our opportunities as a party among Latinos are looking ahead?
I think this is, we're ripe for the opportunity of, as Matt said, engaging the Latino community because it's growing voting bloc. And to put it blunt, the Democrats need us, and we need to make sure we show up in ways that that are going to be meaningful. And that means also showing up as consultants, as operatives, as strategists, and show up for our community to make sure that we are the megaphone for our community. The alliances and infrastructure that are going to be put in place today, as Matt said, they're going to pay dividends tomorrow. You're going to see the results for many elections to come, not just 2022, 2024, but we're talking about, very long-term engagement and commitment.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I know I said those would be our closing remarks, but I just found out we have questions in the socio chat. So I'm going to feed some to you all real quick. Silvina, how do campaigns deal with the issue of addressing the community as Latino, Hispanic, Latinx? I know Latinx was really blowing up on Twitter this week. So what are your thoughts on how campaigns move forward with that?
I think it comes to geography and on background. And I think, one of the things that I took away from an early organizer, Silvina, was when I went to a door knock and I wanted to talk to somebody, and I labeled them as Latino, and they were like, no, I'm Hispanic. And so I think, getting to have organizers and operatives on the ground that are going to understand that is really important, to not have those mishaps. You have the whole Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, the whole thing, the whole enchilada. So you have to make sure that you're talking to the right person with the right message. And that is just by paying attention and being intentional and cognizant about what your community is going to need.
Absolutely. And I think it's just another example of why having Latinos in the room helping to inform and make those decisions is so critical. I have a sense of what percentage of Latinos will vote for someone because they're Latino versus how many Latinos will reject identity politics and vote for a non-Latino that they like better?
Well, a lot of this depends on the type of elections. We know in local elections, nonpartisan elections, there is still a lot of support for the idea of ethnic representation. So city council, county, mayor, a lot of us like to see the first ever Latino elected to those offices, and we'll give that person an extra boost. When you get into partisan politics, it does become a lot more about party, Democrat versus Republican. But even there, we know that Latino candidates, when they run as Democrats, they do better than the average Democrat. And I think it's not just because we're blindly voting for a Latino. It's because typically those Latino candidates, they invest more, they understand the community, they have a message that resonates better. And so really it's about, organizing and outreach. But there does seem to consistently be a boost where when a Latino candidate comes along, we are more willing to support and listen to that candidate.
That's really interesting. I actually didn't know that, so thank you. Alicia, what can we do to recruit more Latinos to work on campaigns and in progressive politics overall?
I think you can provide opportunities. Pay them. I hear your boss say this all the time. Pay them. There are many people across the country that want to get involved and maybe don't have the opportunities to live in Washington, D.C., like some of us do. Create those opportunities. And now is the time virtually for them to get involved and stay involved. At my firm, I was tired of the cyclical cycle of on again and off again with campaigns. And I plan to break that culture. I have people that are here long term, and they're not here for just one cycle or another. And where I can, we help our employees find their next role. So they are constantly working and moving and building their resumes and growing and learning skills and tools to develop them and move on to the next job and become the next, leader in Latino and Hispanic politics. So providing opportunities where you can. And to those people who are looking to find those opportunities, never say no. Always accept an opportunity to learn and grow. And, if you have the opportunity and privilege to volunteer, do so. If you have the opportunity to get paid to do this work, take that chance.
Absolutely. I think what you just said touches very close to home for me, because Chuck and Solidarity, we strongly believe in paying interns. We closely partner with the organization Pay Your Interns to do that. And it's a fact. If Chuck hadn't paid me when I started at Solidarity as a fellow, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to gain all of the experience that I gained. It's been invaluable. And when I see these postings and things of unpaid internships, that's a closed door. That is a barrier to letting us into the room.
For the most part, we're coming from marginalized communities. And so if you're not providing that opportunity, then you're continuing the cycle, and you're not, you're breaking what is an opportunity for those Latino leaders in the future, and to continue and be on panels like this and be us one day. And so...
Right. Absolutely. And Silvina, this takes us to another part of employers who come asking for diverse talent, but they don't know where to find diverse talent. That's something that personally blows our minds, but what's your reaction to that? And what do you think those employers can do?
Literally look in your communities. I cannot stress that enough. I have found that, I'll give another example. I worked in Texas 23 back in 2014, and I got the chance to work with a gentleman who was a lot older than I was, but who knew exactly how to turn out voters in his community. It's literally looking in the communities that you have and the network that those people are going to have in the outreach that they are going to be able to do. It's really important. Having somebody from the community who not only understands it, but also is living the challenges, the virtues, the everything that is happening in district or in the state. So looking really close to local activists, local volunteers. There's so much talent out there, and I don't think we do enough about getting those people to come on board and extending the opportunity. Hey, when Latinos have the opportunity and we have somebody who believes in us, we really get the work done and we really win. So yeah.
Totally. And it's funny, Amy Pritchard, the founder of Gain Power, just told me if she had a nickel for everyone who asked her for diverse resumes, she would be very rich. And that's a sentiment that I think all of us can agree with. And not only is it the closed barriers, not only is it the unpaid internships, but it's also, requiring college degrees, especially for these entry-level positions, for internships. Requiring cover letters. Sometimes, I'm a first generation college student. My parents are immigrants. We had no idea how the school system in the United States worked. And when I started applying to schools and applying to jobs, I had no idea what a cover letter was. And God knows the number of positions I didn't apply to simply because I had no idea what they were looking for. So there's all these also small barriers that end up adding up and lead to the reality that we find ourselves in now. And to that point, Alicia, should campaigns with a non-Latino candidate use interpreters during campaign events?
Should campaigns with a non... Latino candidate? Does that mean non-Spanish speaking, I assume?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think it could be successful if you are, trying to represent and resonate and connect with an audience that is bilingual, monolingual, or or Spanish speaking only, and that's who you're, trying to reach out to. You're gonna need help if you don't speak the language. So yes, and an interpreter may not be the way to go, but there might be opportunities for you to hire someone, hire a field director who is a Spanish speaker, hire a communications director who is a Spanish speaker, have them show you the ropes. And there's nothing wrong with not speaking the language. I am a Latino woman, Hispanic born and raised. I don't speak Spanish. That's okay. So connect and communicate that. And there are so many Latino people and Hispanic people that also don't speak Spanish, and that's okay. And that will resonate with a lot of people.
Absolutely. I think something working on the Bernie 2020 campaign that we did often that we saw such great success with was when we were doing community-based events. Part of our panel, we always tried, especially if we were in a heavy Latino area, having people on the panel who spoke Spanish and who sometimes would respond in Spanish or even do quick quips in Spanish. And that's what feels more authentic. It doesn't feel like the candidate is pandering to the community, but still gets the community involved in listening. Silvina, this is something that might be more personal for you. How does the Democratic Party deal with our inability to pass the DREAM Act?
That is a very hard question. I think we need to be very careful with how we're walking that line. I think it is time. We've been working at this, as you said, since 2010 and even before 2010. And I think working with partners like United with Dream, We Are Home, working with our partners is going to be really crucial for us to be able to get the Democrats to understand, the sense of urgency that is behind this. But I think, it is due time that something gets done, especially for early childhood arrivals that have no idea, have no fault of their own of being in the United States. So there's still some work to do there, but working across partnerships is going to be really important, and listening to our partners that who are in the trenches every day.
Absolutely. I want to thank our panelists one more time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For our audience, if there are any takeaways from you, it's very much heavy on we're not a monolith and start early. There are ways that you can help do that, whether it's by, if you work on campaigns, raising that to your bosses, to the supervisors, making it part of your strategy. You got to talk to us specifically to where we're at and what our backgrounds are, but it has to start now. We're less than a year out from the election. Time is ticking, and Republicans have been at it for a while now. So we have some ground to make up, but there's time to get it done. So thank you so much once again to our panelists, and thank you all to our audience for joining us tonight.